Okay, before we're going to discuss how are we going to work with an API, okay, I would like to go back first to the diagram I have presented to you in our previous videos. Okay, um, what we have so far, the last video is we have our web app directly working or communicating with our API, which is in PHP. And by the way, it's only uh, our our API before only served as our data source. Okay, uh, the data source, which is actually a constant. It's not coming from anywhere, but it is we have just created our data from our API itself. Then it returns as it receives a request from our web app, then it's just going to return a response. Okay, so now we are going to involve a database. Okay, so it is not only our web and our API, but we are now going to involve our database, which is we're going to use the MySQL database. Okay, so I'm going to show you first how our API is going to communicate with our database. In a way, in our previous video, I have already shown you how are you going to do with this one here. We have used the axios package or library so that our web app could communicate with our API. So now, how are we going to communicate with our database? Okay, so our API in PHP, by the way, we're going to use here a PHP. Okay, then again, it is going to send a request to our database. Then our database is going to process that request. Then it is going to send a response. So again, still request and response. Okay. Then later on, after we could get the response, then we are going to uh, direct that response into our web application. Okay. So first, we are going to determine where is our database, where is our API, and where is our web. Okay. So this is our database. Okay. So we are going to work with DB contacts. Okay. So it is a very simple application. So we're in users could register. Okay. And when the user is going to register, we're going to get his username and password and the user's full name. And once he has already registered, then the user then can input his or her contacts. Okay, so we have here the fields. We have the user ID, which is a foreign key actually from our TBL users. Then the name of the contact, the phone number, email address, the home address, then the group where this contact belongs. And in our group, by the way, we have the classmates, family, and so on. Okay? And then we're going to have the image in which we are going to have the image on the upcoming videos. Okay? So if ever we're going to see what are I have now actually some records inputted into my database. So we have an existing users, okay, in which we have in my previous examples with my previous classes, okay, so I have already used these DB contacts. Then in my groups, TBL groups, so we have family, friends, classmates, colleagues, and so on. Okay, and the contacts. Okay, so we have here the name, okay, the phone number, and so on. And this is now the ID of the owner of this record. Okay, and again, this is a foreign key from the user's table. Okay, so it is a very simple, very easy to understand database design. Okay, so this is now our database. So where would be the location of our API? So actually, I have changed the location of the API. I have it here on okay, htdocs. Okay, inside my sump. Then I have here contacts API. Okay, so at the moment I have two values, two files here: hello.php and template.php. I'm going to discuss later on these two. And by the way, I'm going to add some more. I'm going to get the connection file. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to discuss them one by one later on. Okay, paste. Okay. So I have here my hello.php. Okay, we have hello.php. So as you can see, it is now fully working. Okay, so my API is now working. My API folder is fully working because I have accessed my hello.php, so it's now working onto my browser, and I'm going to access that also from my. Okay, I'm going to use here my Postman. Okay. Okay, I'm going to try my hello.php. Okay, so http localhost slash contacts dash API slash hello.php. Okay, then send. So we should get here now hello world. So therefore, our API is fully, our API folder is fully working. Okay. So I have here the content of my hello.php. Okay. So anyway, in our previous video, we have already tried working with some basic API in PHP. Okay. So I have created here a template because we are going to use here a template when we are going to deal with our clients. Okay. So first is the class, no, the headers. Now I have already defined this one. So meaning this one here defines the content type, which is JSON. Okay, so it is not going to contain, it is pure text. Okay, so since it is in JSON format, and this is to avoid the course error. Okay, so we are, as of now, we have no security. We're allowing all pages to access this API. Okay, then we are going to define here a class. Okay, in this example that I have is I have the user class. Okay, why it is because this file here. Okay, I'm going to create here users.php. Okay, and I'm going to copy my template. Okay, so that we are not going to type from zero. Okay, so because this file here, this API is going to work all concerns about the users. For example, the user can log in, the user can register, so we could get all users and so on. Okay, so that is why we have defined here a class named user. Okay, and these are the three methods that we have. Okay, although in our first example is we are going to have first only our login. Okay, then outside the class definition is we are going to check, okay, what method has been used by the client. Okay, so if ever the method is get, so therefore we are going to use the super global get, but if ever it is a post, so therefore we're going to use post, and we are going to ask from the user two parameters. First, operation. Okay, operation means what does the user wants. Okay, in our case we have, is it login, register, or get the list of users. Okay, so in every API we are going to have different operations. Okay, but in our example here we are going to define, actually first would be login. Okay, that's our operation, and another one is our JSON, or the data needed by our API and API endpoint. Okay, for example, what are the data needed in login operation? Okay, so the parameters would be the username and password. So that's the value, or that's the data or parameter we need from the client. So going back to our data here. Okay, so since we are going to communicate with from here, okay, from our web to our API, so we are going to pass our request, we are going to send username and password. Okay, so that's the JSON data contained into our request, and the operation would be login. Okay, so when the API knows that we are going to log in, so therefore it is going to create a login request to our database, then passing then the username and password that comes from our client, which is our web application. Okay, so then the database is going to determine, okay, if that request, that username and password is present, then it could be either successful or not. It is going to send a response, and subsequently it is going to reply or send the response into our web application. Okay, so that's our procedure. Okay, so that is why here we have, again, operation would be login, and JSON, the JSON data contains the username and password. Okay, so that's our to determine which is what is the operation and the JSON data. We're just going to have it here, JSON data. Okay, so here we are then going to create a new object. Okay, because we are going to access any of the methods or the functions here based on the operation requested by the user. Okay, so switch. Okay, if ever the operation is equal to login, so therefore it is going to call the login method or function of the object user, which is defined actually here. Okay, and our login operation or method requires a JSON data, okay, which contains our username and password. Okay. Okay. So we are now going to first we're going to work with our API. Okay. So here we're going to use get actually. Okay. But anyway, for security purposes, you could use the post, or we could have you could still use the get, but then we're just going to have the encryption, but we are going to have the encryption later on. Okay, so first of all is we are going to create a connection. Okay, so I have defined here connection-pdo.php. Okay, so this is the file that contains the connection script. Okay, so that because if ever we're not going to separate the connection routine in each of the functions here, we are going to write the connection script. So therefore, we have separated here and included in our functions later on. So here we are going to define the name of the server, which is in our case, we have the local host. Okay. Then the username, by default, we have root. Okay. Then the password is blank, and the database name is db contacts. Okay. Then we have here in line number 8, this now we are now defining here a new PDO object. Okay, PDO means a PHP Data Object. So it is here where we are going to connect, okay, into our database, and if ever successful, it is going to return a connection object. Okay, so that is why here we have defined, meaning the server is we have, or the database engine is we have MySQL or MySQL. Then the host is the server name that we have defined here. Okay, database name is we have here the DB contacts. Then we have the username and the password as defined into our into line number 3 and number 4. Okay. Then set the PDO error code to exception. It is because if ever we are going to meet an error, so set attribute error mode exceptions. It is going to return a PDO error. Okay, so that we could easily understand or identify just in case we have an error into our PHP script, which pertains to our PHP data objects. So it is going to report an error based on the PDO errors. Okay, so that is our try block. So if ever there will be an error, so it is going to go to the catch block. Then it is just going to say connection failed. Then whatever would be the message of our error. Okay, so this is now our routine for connecting into our database. So if when our API executes this routine, so we have now created a connection between our API and our database. Okay, so next would be to send then our request. Okay. Hello users. Okay, so that we are going to call our connection objects. So we're going to have include, then the name is we have connection dash PDO dot PHP. Okay, so next is we are going to get the JSON that has been sent from our client. Okay, so I'm just going to have here JSON, because take note here that the JSON has been sent in the form of a JSON string. Okay, so therefore this JSON value here still in string form. And by the way, the content of that would be username, then whatever would be, let us say the username, and the password, let us say 12345. Okay, and by the way, in PHP we have this one here, like that, and it is still on the string format. Okay, so what are we going to do is we are going to convert this string into an array. Okay, so we are going to use JSON decode, then the JSON there. Okay, so meaning decode means, oh, we don't have the definition. Okay, okay, so decodes a okay, decodes a JSON string. Okay, inappropriate PHP type. In this form here, since we are sending a JSON string, so therefore what we're doing here is we are converting, okay, this JSON string into an array. Okay, so that we could work with each of the elements later on. Okay, so JSON, then comma. So we have here the next parameter, which is true. Okay, okay, I'm going to go to the syntax. Okay, so first syntax is our string JSON. So we have the JSON there. Then we have bool, or a boolean value, if ever we are going to set the array into an associative array. Okay, so when you say associative array, instead of using index, okay, indexes, for example 1, 0, or so on, for example, we're going to have instead of using JSON, okay, to denote the first element, okay, we could just have username. Okay, so meaning we are associating, okay, it is called associative array, Okay, because we are associating this one here, this username, to the key. Okay, take note that a JSON string contains a key value pair. Okay, so meaning we are using here the key, we're associating the key username into this array. Okay, that is why we have here the true value. Okay, so next is we are then going to define our SQL or SQL statement. Okay, so how are we going to define if or determine if a username and password is valid? Okay, so it's simple as select asterisk from, we have TBL users. Going back to our database is we have TBL users. Okay, and we are going to determine the validity of the login credentials through the USR username and USR password. Okay, from TBL users, where USR username, okay, there USR username and USR password, okay, is equal to, now we are going to use a placeholder, okay, denoted by colon. Okay, so meaning we are going to later on supply a value for the username. Okay, so I'm just going to move it there, then and USR password is equal to password. Okay, so this is now our SQL statement. Okay, so next, since we are going to use here a prepared statement, okay, prepared statement is equal to con, where does this connection object came from? It is from the connection dash PDO. So we have it here. This con here, since we have included that file here, so we could now use the con object. Okay, so con, then in PHP, instead we are going to use the dot notation, so we're going to use the thin arrow notation, because the dot here in PHP is concatenation. Okay, then con, I'm just going to read it as that. Okay, dot prepare, then we have our SQL statement. Okay, so what we are doing here now is we are now preparing, okay, this statement and creating now a prepared statement. Okay, prepared statement, there are two ways, and the one way on how to do with work with a database in PHP is we have the MySQL or PDO, and I always select PDO, particularly the prepared statement compared with MySQL. Okay, so once we have prepared, okay, our prepared statement, so the next thing that we're going to do is to supply values for these placeholders. Okay, so we have here statement, then we are going to bind parameters. Okay, bind parameters, we're going to have the username, okay, and the value, which is JSON, then we have username. Okay, because again we are expecting here username and password from our Next.js, from the client. Okay, so that is why here I am confident, or I am not confident, but I am now using the word username. Okay, because that is what I am expecting from my client. Okay, so you have username, which is whatever would be the value passed by the client would be the one assigned into my username variable. Okay, so next would be for my password. This one here, password, and the password coming from the client, which is this one here. Okay, so in which we are going to have that later on into our next JS. Okay, so next we have prepared our SQL statement. We have assigned values into our variables. Then the next thing that we're going to do is to execute. Okay, statement, then dot execute. Okay, so after we have executed this statement, okay, so it is possible that there is a record being returned. Take note, we are using here select. Okay, so therefore it is going to return some records, or if ever there are no records, so therefore it is going to return a blank value. Okay, so I'm going to have here a variable. I'm going to call it return value. Okay, because we're expecting here for a return value from our database. Okay, so statement, then we're going to have fetch all. Okay, fetch all meaning returns an array containing all of the result set rows. Okay, so it is going to return an array. Okay, anyway, what we are expecting here is only 0 or 1 record. Okay, PDO, then fetch. Again, it is fetch a sock because we are going to have it again as an associative array. Okay, then after that, so once it is executed, so we are now going to fetch whatever are the records being returned by the database. Okay, so next is actually to return, okay, whatever is our return value. Okay, but just like with our previous example, previous video, this is going to return an error. Why? It is because return value is an array. Okay, and when I say return, by the way, it is being called from here, echo, then the return is an array. Okay, so therefore it is going to return an error. Okay, because we are going to display here whatever is the return value from the function login. So if ever it is going to return an array, so therefore it is going to give us an error into this line here. Okay, so just like with our previous video, we are going to convert this one into a string by encoding it into a JSON format. Okay, and to complete our code is we are going to clean up. Okay, so I know you're familiar now with your OOP, so we have our garbage collector anyway. It is going to collect all unused objects. Okay, but anyways, we are just going to clean our own mess. That is what they call it. It is a good programming practice that we are going to unset the objects that we have used. So I'm going to unset the connection object, okay, and also unset my statement object. Okay, so we are going to try. Before going to have a recap, I'm going to save this one, then I'm going to access it here, users.php, and we have parameters. As I've said, our parameters, we have username and password. Okay, for my username, okay, I'm going to try pitok then 12345 for the password. Okay, So the value is we have pitok and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to use here get method. Okay, so it should display here, if ever valid, then it is going to display a record of pitok. If not, then it is going to display a blank array. But if ever there will be an error into our code, so it is going to display here the error in our code. So send. Okay, so we have there an error. Okay, by the way, I forgot. It is operation and JSON. It is not username and password. Okay, so we have here our error. So we have operation. What is our operation? So we have login, and next is we have JSON, in which our JSON contains username, username is pitok, comma, password, then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so again, still we have the username and the password. Okay, I'll try send blank. So I guess I'm going to have there also string send. Okay, username and password. Okay, so we're going to check our code. Okay, I'll check. Okay, I'm going to echo if I am sending the correct value. Echo, then die. Die means it is going to continue anymore to the next line. Okay, so save, then send. Password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Wait. Okay, I'll try to change this one to double quote. Then the password. Then I'll remove, okay, the JSON, then send. Okay, so it's double quote. That's my error. Okay, so as you can see, it now sends us back the record of the user that corresponds to our JSON data here. Okay, which is we have the username pitok and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So take note, if ever it is valid, it is going to return a record, the record of the user. Okay, but if ever invalid, for example, let us say I'm going to have an invalid password there, then send, it is going to return a blank array. Okay, so that's how are we going to determine if ever it is successful. Okay, again, it is going to return, okay, at least one record. But if ever it's not, it is going to return a blank array. Okay, so therefore, our code here is correct. Okay, so again, first we have decoded our JSON, meaning we have converted this one here into an array so that we could use here as an associative array. Okay, so that is why we have there the second parameter. We have true, then this is to determine the SQL statement to determine if that username and password is in our database. Okay, so we have then prepared our created our prepared statement. Then we have assigned here the values for our variables, is username and password. Then finally executed our command. Okay, then once we have executed our command, it is possible that it has returned a value or a record or a blank array. So that would now contains or contained into our return value variable, then return the encoded array into a JSON format. Okay, we have here the return value, and the result would be this one here. Okay, so that's our login routine. Okay, so as you can see, with our what's this, Postman, our API tester, so we have successfully created our login endpoint. Okay, login API endpoint. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do then, so we are now done with API and here. Okay, so next is from web, we are going to send our data into our API. Okay, so how are we going to send data into our API? So just like before with our example, so we used, is this the one? Okay, so this is our home. I think I used the other file. Okay, so I'm just going to use this one here as, I'm just going to call this one. By the way, I'm not going to use, okay, I'm not going to use yet the use effect. Then it is not the students anymore. We don't have that. We don't have the use effect. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to have these two here as text. Okay, so here we have enter, I'm just going to have it username. Then here the value, we have password. Okay, because we are going to let the user to input username and the password. Okay, so we're going to have it then. Okay, again, I'm not going to have any layout into this into my code as of now, because I want to concentrate on the functionalities. Okay, so by the way, since we don't have, oh, okay, I'm going to run it first. Okay, then I'm going to install axios. Okay, because again, this is not the file I used in my previous video, so therefore we don't have the axios yet. Okay, npm install or axios. Okay, let us wait for a little while. Then, okay, I'm going to assign now while waiting. Okay, so since we're going to have the username and the password, so I'm going to have here const username, then set username is equal to use state, then blank, and then we're going to have the password, then set password use state, then we have blank. Okay, so after that, so we're going to have it here. The value would be username, then set username. So I know you're not familiar with what I'm doing now. So over here next is we have password and set password. Okay. Then we have here our login. And we don't need our table. Okay. By the way, I'm just going to call this one as login. So we're going to have here login. Then we're going to have our main later on. Okay. Save. Okay, I'm having a problem again with my servers. I'm going to pause yet the video. I'm going to return later on. Okay, so I'm having a problem with my device as of the moment. So I'm going to end this video. Anyway, we have now, we are done with our API. Okay, so I'm just going to return with part 2 of this topic. Okay, and I'm going to discuss then the client into our next JS. Okay, we're going to continue with this one later on because I need to restart my device. So I'm going to end at this point, then I'll see you on the part 2 of this video.